Well, hi everyone, it's Todd Gross, and I will switch my screen over. Hey, thanks for joining me today. I couldn't resist from going outside. I'm kind of an outdoor kind of guy, and the fact that I can put the video, what I just did. Anyway, the fact that I could put the video on the tripod and then walk around with it. This is actually an idea that I had many years ago to do. And I created a makeshift one. And then when they came out with the iPhone and the Androids, and it wasn't just done with cameras, but it was done, of course, with the phones, then they became standardized. So the fact that I can actually carry this rod that's kind of poking into my stomach and make this video look somewhat good, I'm glad to do it. For those of you that are just coming in now, I want to tell you this is not normal that I do a Periscope. This is something new to me, and this is not specific training so much on Periscope, which you've got, of course, in a handout. You should have gotten a handout on that. And what this is more on is how to carry yourself, how to broadcast on the Periscope or in general, but especially on the Periscope, because we're going to be talking about the differences between doing it here versus doing it in more formal settings, such as the sales letters that I do. First, I know this is more akin to a webinar to ask this, but can everybody hear me? Because being new to this, I'm not sure that you're seeing me, hearing me, that sort of thing. And if you type in on your screen, of course, I will be able to tell if you just do respond that way. Yes, thank you very much. You see, this is a funny thing, because of my glasses, I can't see very well, but that's Anne. Thank you, Anne. So I could read the answer that you just did, but I couldn't specifically see your name without taking my glasses off and putting it in. Oh, the griefs of old age here. As you can see, this is a very lovely location that I'm broadcasting from today. I'm down in Orlando, Florida. It's a spot in Orlando, as you can see. Here's the pool and the house. And this is what I look out over during the course of the day. Very, very rural for this area. Not at all like you'd expect in a Disney-fied sort of environment, and Universal and all that, and all the traffic. You can spin around to the lanai. That's just to kind of go along with the whole idea of Periscope, which is, of course, to see through. Now, I do have an outline with me today, which is one of the things I'm going to talk about. How you shouldn't really feel that you shouldn't have an outline, because you do want to seem as natural as possible, but on the other hand, you want to seem prepared. Thank you very much for saying it's gorgeous. And what we're going to call this today, other than just WP Scope bonus, is Periscope Practical Performance. And I want to talk about, from the very beginning here, how this all came about, because some of the history you probably aren't even aware of. In fact, most people on Periscope aren't aware of the importance of Periscope and basically broadcasting on Periscope. And this will all make sense in just a minute. So even though it sounds like I'm rambling a bit, I won't be, as you'll see in a moment. You see, I worked in television for many, many years. All right, so I worked for 22 years, in fact, at a station in Boston, Channel 7 in Boston. And as I was coming up through the ranks in the 70s and 80s, late 70s and 80s, I was actually not on TV till 1980. I was doing radio in late 70s. But when I was doing that, there was a whole shift that was taking place. It was moving away from content, and it was moving towards, instead of content, the glamorous look, the professionalism of the broadcaster, the canned look and performance of the broadcaster, and I was always rebelling against that. So I would tell stories about my family. When I was doing the weather, of all things, I would show my kids in Halloween costumes. I would wear a Halloween costume. There was one place I worked, Satellite News Channel, which now today is owned by CNN. They kind of absorbed it into HLN. It was where HLN is now. It was called CNN Headline News before that, and before that it was SNC. When I worked there, they gave me a really hard time when I tried to personalize it at all, because that was a network that I worked at. It was before Boston. And there was a movie that came out shortly thereafter that really, really tried to capture this. And again, this all relates to Periscope and online, so just hang in with me here as I tell this kind of boring story to start, and it gets more interesting. You see, what happened was, this movie came out, Broadcast News, with Holly Hunter and William Hurt. You probably know of it. Some of you have seen it. Some of you haven't. But it was very, very important. It captured the whole concept of content versus glamour. So William Hurt represented the glamour. Holly Hunter represented the content, and her other friend, Albert, I forget his last name, the actor. And that movie, to this day, has some really interesting carry-throughs. In other words, if you watch the news today, you'll see the same sort of battle going on. But, as predicted in the movie, the glamour won over the content. I can't mention any names. I was going to mention a specific name in broadcasting who represented the... I don't want to get in trouble, but there's a specific anchor who got in trouble about a year ago on one of the networks who represented that William Hurt character in terms of real life. I know him, but I knew that he wasn't a serious journalist. He was the glamour that made it sound and look good. Well, along came YouTube. Now, it was originally Google Video, not YouTube. And YouTube came and was working side by side with Google Video. There was one and the other, and then Google bought it, and it all became YouTube. And people were able to just be themselves, to just do videos off the cuff. And all of a sudden, they were YouTube stars and all kinds of things that was completely opposite of what the consultants wanted when I worked in TV, what the news directors, program directors, general managers wanted. It was people being themselves. All right, so here's what happened. YouTube, of course, took off. The TV stations, and I've worked until recently in television, I could tell you they scrambled and worried, and still to this day are freaking out and trying to incorporate social media where they can, because that's where people started to flock. They were watching the real people with the real content rather than the blow-dried yuppies, as we used to call them, in an article that came out in the 80s. Then comes along last year. Last year I made a prediction, and I didn't realize that it was happening right while I was predicting it already. And I said that the video on mobile would become interactive. Well, I was really convinced of that, but I didn't realize that it would happen in a way that would be on social media. I thought it would happen more interact with the screen rather than interact with other people right away. So Periscope comes along, of course, other live streams as well. And again, the whole broadcast world has changed around, because the people that are making money and doing well, and not even making money, just having a good time and communicating and being successful in that way on Periscope, are the ones who are not necessarily the ones that are broadcasting the best, that sound the best, that are like the people you see on sales videos or the people you see on TV. They're the ones who are just kind of letting their hair down. So I see there's several people here. If you could give me some hearts if you like that concept by tapping your screen. Give me some hearts if you like that concept of just being yourself when you're broadcasting. All right, great. All right. Now, it's impossible for regular folks otherwise to get involved, because it's like a Hollywood audition to get in front of the screen. But all of a sudden, the people, all right, kind of took over the show. So that's where we stand now. But what I'm here today to tell you is that despite the fact that it's become where we can, as people, broadcast whoever we are, you still don't want to take that to the extreme where you look sloppy, where you don't understand where you can improve from a broadcast standpoint. So that's what I'm here today to do, to help you with that and to answer questions. Now, at the very end, I'll take off my glasses. You'll see my ugly mug without my glasses so that I can take your questions, because I can't read your questions otherwise with my vision. So it's pretty funny. So this is what I'm going to do. I am going to give you a little bit of voice and broadcast training right now to talk about how you can actually make sure that you don't look like a total schlub when you do Periscope. And in terms of the logistics and the specifics of Periscope, there are other places that you can head, including the handout that we gave. And that will give you, of course, more specifics on Periscope itself. But in terms of presenting yourself, that's what this bonus is all about today. So the very first thing that I have to stress, and I did it today, okay, you can see once in a while I'm looking at just a few casual notes that I took, is what I call, or I didn't make this up, the 7 Ps, which is proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. Now, I was out with a photographer once, it was around 1990, and he just rambled that at me. He just threw that at me. He said that's his Army slogan. And, you know, I can't tell you how true that is. Even though you want to be off the cuff, you need to be prepared. And one of the ways to be prepared so that you do look good when you're broadcasting or anything is basically to have some sort of outline. Now, you don't have to have a script. A script would be detrimental to what we're trying to do here. But if you have index cards, the larger index cards, or even if you just have it on paper like this, it's going to be very beneficial if you know what you're going to talk about, or as you talk, if you lose your place, you could look down and say, wait just a second, let me see what I wanted to say next. And you say, oh yeah, I wanted to talk about cue cards. That's what I have written down here. Cue cards is what they use on TV talk shows. When I go to any of those shows, and I like to do that a lot, I go to like Jon Stewart, I went to Colbert, I went to Live with Regis and Kathy Lee, except it was Regis and Kelly. And when I was there, I noticed they had cue cards. So if you watch The View, that would be the same thing. They always have something off to the side, not just in the camera to read, but they have cue cards off to the side. And what they do is they give them the general topic of discussion. You see what I mean? It's not something that is specific that they have to read. It's the general topic to keep them moving to the next thing. Now, when I do television weather, we use the image behind us as the cue. So we just click the button. Okay, we have a button. We click it, goes to the next map or the next scene, and it reminds us what to talk about. And that's how we ad-lib. So having an outline is going to really help you a lot if you're going to do any sort of periscoping. And periscoping, as you'll be discovering, is something that you should be doing. It's your chance to take broadcasting into your own hands. Another question is what to wear. Now, I'm wearing, for instance, a collared shirt just so that I can look, halfway decent. I'm not wearing a suit or a tie or anything like that. And you don't have to wear a collared shirt, but I just suggest you don't look really sloppy. I've seen some folks do sales letters, in fact, and put themselves on the front of a really high-end product where they're wearing a t-shirt that is a sloppy t-shirt. So I would not do that. Third thing, and this goes along with the 7 Ps, is practice, and practice a lot. Both speaking and, of course, practice periscoping to yourself. I did it a few times, and I obviously have a little bit of broadcast experience, and I still needed to do it just to feel comfortable enough to speak today. So practice also in terms of your diction and things like that by reading out loud. Now, that is a trick that really works if you read children's books to children, if you read newspapers out loud on the subway. If you're on the subway, that's what I used to do. That will really help a lot. Now, I want to teach you some tricks on... Uh-oh, my battery is running a little low. Okay, I'll keep an eye on that. I want to teach you a couple of tricks on your voice. One thing is to lower your voice pitch. You can actually do it, both men and women, even though women don't have as pronounced an Adam's apple. If you put your hand on your Adam's apple here. This is because I was moving. I hurt myself on the one of those hammer things. Anyway, if you do this and lower your voice, you'll feel that your Adam's apple drops. And if you bring your voice high, you'll feel that your Adam's apple rises. And it's preferable in general to be lower and then hit higher when you're going to use it for inflection. So keep that in mind. That's one way that you could practice raising and lowering your voice, is with your Adam's apple. Next thing I wanted to talk to you about is nasality. Now, you may have a nasal voice. I have a very nasal voice, and I try to project from my lungs. And the way you could practice that is actually by holding your nose shut and just trying to get it out of your chest, as we would say in TV. That is, broadcasting from your chest, talking from your chest rather than from your nose like that. Next thing is, many of you watching have accents. I obviously have a U.S. accent, and that's desirable for what I'm looking for, but I had a bad New York accent. When you have an accent, the way to get rid of it is to mimic others. So whoever you want to sound like, you need to mimic them, just like an actor would. So I would mimic the broadcasters on TV that I thought sounded the best with the least amount of accent, as an example. When you do this, to avoid being nervous, I've got a trick for you. First of all, look directly in the camera as much as you can. Look directly towards the screen, because that eye contact is important. But when you get nervous and you want to speak or read off your notes, just tap and then show something, and then you could read off your script or your outline, because we don't have a script, right? So I can actually speak right now while you're looking at that nice scene and keep track of what I'm saying right here on my outline. Speak to folks as if you were speaking to them in person, if you can. Now, that's something it took me a long time to work on. I always shouted at people rather than talked with people, and that's difficult to do, and that's one of the reasons why you want to practice. Again, don't think about this too much, because we don't want you to stress over it. But the whole idea is that you want to be yourself and not worry about your performance as much as you're worrying about just kind of sharing. However, try not to As soon as you feel the urge to do a pause instead. Just a blank space. And don't get too hung up on answering questions while you're broadcasting, because that could throw you off. You do want to eventually become interactive. All right? So, for instance, you'll notice here I'm not interacting with you guys too much yet, because I am going to save that for the end. And that way, I will not have to worry about my rhythm being broken. And lastly, just don't take yourself too seriously. You know, I don't have a great sense of humor. Some folks think I do, but I don't. And I find myself amusing sometimes. My wife does not, which is pretty funny. But one thing I would say, you see, I said there, but it's all right occasionally. I would try just not to take yourself too seriously and just kind of stop, tell folks what's going on if you get lost in what you're saying, and then start again. So if you lose track, say, hey, listen, I lost track of what I'm saying. You know, instead of taking it too seriously and worrying about it. Because this is Periscope, and that's going to happen. So with that, this is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go sit down, and I am going to answer some of your questions if you have any, and if you don't, I'll make some up. And then we'll have to end because my battery is getting a little weak, but I hope that this was helpful. All right, so those of you that came in, do any of you have anything you'd like to ask? And if so, ask now. If not, I'll bring up some topics. Okay. How do we narrow down a topic is the question. Let me just adjust this a little bit. It depends on what your goal is. So obviously, it could be just for communication, or you could be sending somebody to a specific web page to opt into something. You want to, again, I'm not doing this on the Periscope itself, I'm doing the Periscope itself, but you want to make sure that the specific topic that you're thinking about doing is going to be what you put in as what you are seeing, because what you are seeing used to mean more like where you are, what you're looking at, and now it's more like what am I going to be talking about. But it's all goal dependent. So for instance, if your goal is to get people to opt in to get a free item, and this is in a marketing stance, then whatever it is that you're going to be pitching for them to get for free, you've got to make that your specific topic, because it needs to be extremely relatable, meaning extremely connected. It always has to be very targeted to what you're talking about and what you're giving away. On the other hand, if you're doing it just like this to warm people up to you, to train a little bit, to get them to know you more, then it could be much more broad, and it could be basically anything at all that you want, as long as it's pertaining to where eventually you want to take them. So for instance, my topic today was related to the bonus that I gave for WP Scope, which of course is a product related to Periscope. So I needed to make sure that it was related to Periscope, even though what I'm talking about is broadcasting. So I needed to tailor the broadcast tips to Periscope itself. Okay? So that's an example. All right, let's see if there's another question. Any other questions coming in? Okay, here's a question I know that folks have been asking me, and that is, how often should I do this? One of the beauties of periscoping is, again, if you're going to be doing it for marketing reasons and getting people to warm up to you first, what's really, really crucial is you get them to know you. So if you do it on the fly, eventually this is going to go out to your followers, and it's going to be somewhat spur of the moment. That's what makes this different and beautiful. So you can do it pretty frequently that way, but I wouldn't say do it all the time where somebody grows numb to you. And when you do it, even though you want them to warm up to you, and that's the purpose of the Periscope in this particular case that I'm drawing now, rather than to actually opt in to get anything or to buy anything or anything like that, I really suggest that you have at least something of content to say. And that's how we began today. We spoke about the content as being what is driving this. And even though it's like getting to know people and it's all social and it's fun and isn't that what it's about, it is and it isn't. It really is about the content that people are getting from that, right? And content is what makes people's lives better, whether they just enjoy watching you or whether they know that they're going to be learning something on any niche, any topic at all. So keep that in mind, that when you do just jump on, if you're just jumping on for the sake of jumping on, that's okay if you have something in mind so that it's part of an overall plan. Point A to point Z has all those other letters in between, B, C, D, E, F. What I mean is, it's an overall plan of communication with an audience. I am a marketer. I am teaching you how to broadcast as a marketer. I am not suggesting that I am teaching you how to broadcast just to be friends. I'm talking about improving your overall credibility, your branding, your ability to communicate with the person on the other side. That's what I'm talking about. And that's why I'm saying you have to think of it as a whole. And you don't want to waste people's time by just saying, I'm driving to the supermarket now. You're saying I'm driving to the supermarket now because I'm going to do a test marketing plan, or I'm driving to Home Depot because I'm picking up some tools, and those tools are going to help me build a shed, and I'm going to teach you about shed building, then it makes sense. But if you just say I'm driving to Home Depot and it doesn't really have anything to do with what you generally talk about, it doesn't make sense. So that's what I would say to answer that question. All right, with that in mind, I didn't realize my battery was kind of low, so I'm going to end right now, but I hope this... Do I recommend using Catch? Yes, I do recommend using Catch. Catch, of course, is going to allow you to actually capture each one afterwards, and I think that that is very good to use. And I hear that it's easier than ever to use it. I think it's catch.me, I believe, for those of you asking. Wouldn't you know it, now it's starting to rain. Okay, so I'm going to end this now. There's no more questions, and again, thank you so much for joining me on my first official Periscope. The others I've done have just been tests, and I appreciate that. And see, I have to take my glasses off. You get to see me without my glasses. It's so hard to read this. I can't read the names. I can only read the black part. Maybe if I go in the lanai, I can read the names. Okay, let's try that again. Thanks again. All right, I'm going to end this now, and this has been a lot of fun. I'll stop by showing you the view of the pool again. Thanks for the hearts, by the way.